Let's find this. Our speaker today is our good friend and author and teacher, Mirabai Starr. Woohoo! She's going to speak about reclaiming your life as holy ground because she is so awesome, and it is true. She is an award-winning author of creative nonfiction and contemporary translations of sacred literature. She taught philosophy and world religions at Taos for 20 years, and now she teaches and speaks internationally on contemplative practice and interspiritual dialogue. Certified bereavement counselor, she helps mourners harness the transformational power of loss. And she's awesome. She's just awesome. She's my buddy. Please welcome Mirabai. Examining that. Let's do this. See people. Let's see. I see you. You see them. There we go. Ho, ho, ho. Hi. Hi. Thanks for coming. So many other things you could be doing today. I'm really glad you chose to do this, or somebody talked you into it, or whatever got you here. Coercion. I'd like to begin with a poem, which for me is a prayer, same, poems and prayers. This is by my friend Rosemary Watola Trommer, highly recommended poet. Today, prayer is the silence in the snow-deep meadow. It's the gurgle of the ice-choked river that cannot be heard unless I am completely still. Today, prayer is not to, it's not for, it's something I am more than something I do. Prayer is even the sound of the logging trucks on the highway as they brake rounding the corner. It's the rapid shh of my skis in the track as I climb the hill. It's the sizzle of onions in the oil. It's the hitch in my breath before I cry. I'm astonished today to find there is nothing that isn't prayer. When I am aware it's an invitation to be completely here, to open. It's a call to meet it all with the love that asks nothing from me, except that I give it and receive it. Every single thing can be a prayer. Even the siren blaring by, even my own familiar voice as I listen into the silences for whatever words come next. That's kind of all I have to say. She just said it way better. What is her name again? Rosemary Watola Trommer. Watola Trommer. Yeah. And she writes a poem a day on the internet. I forgot what they call it. Does anyone know what her poem a day thing is called? You could just look her up, Rosemary Watola Trommer. A poem a day every single day for several years now, including through the recent suicide of her son, her teenage son. She's amazing. Look at this. In many ways, I feel that this topic, reclaiming your life as holy ground, is old news to y'all. You know, that I'm preaching to the choir here. And I'm just a little late to the party, I guess. I'm just finally dismantling religiosity and getting down to embodiment. I've talked about it and around it. I've tasted it forever. I'm a Taurus. I'm pretty, embodied. I love pleasure. I love the earth. But I was still quite enmeshed with the forms of spirituality, the not so much religious structures, which I've never been fond of, to tell you the truth, but
the mystical teachings and the monastic traditions and the saints, the ones that we think have worked out something that just isn't coming to us yet. And over time, I have been stripped of these attachments to these religious ideas and forms and structures. I mean, I came upon that stripping honestly, really, because my parents and my teachers, especially here in Taos in the early days, the iconoclastic 70s, taught me that deconstruction is much more interesting than construction. And so they were all busy shedding the norms and values of mainstream American culture. That's why they fled their kind of suburban, often privileged lives across America and ended up in Taos, New Mexico, looking for an alternative to those structures. So deconstruction's in my bones, it's in my DNA. And yet, maybe because of that, teenagers have to rebel. So how do you rebel against hippie parents? I mean, the only way is to become as structured and organized as possible. And so I settled into multiple spiritual traditions, Hinduism with a guru, my guru. I still consider him to be my guru, even though I'm desperately shedding everything I possibly can. He seems to remain, named Karoli Baba. Buddhism, and that too remains in that I have a daily sitting practice in the Vipassana tradition. Sufism, Jewish mysticism, threaded in there later in life, not from my Jewish parents, by the way, who didn't have anything to do with Judaism. And then ultimately the Christianity through the Christian mystics that I had the opportunity to translate. And so each of these traditions resonated with me in some way. And I think I'm going to miss them when they go, but they're going. They're going. And with each book that I write, I feel like I get braver about saying that which we seek, I know this isn't original, lies directly in the very ground that we're living in and from. So even if this is not news to you, perhaps you can feel the freshness of my unfolding epiphany over here and take it in. This very life, this fleeting incarnation, if you've had as much death in your life as I have, and I know many of you have, you know how fleeting it is the very place where the sacred has been dying to get through to you and say, here I am in you. I am in this argument with my friend. I am in this resentment with the dude who, never mind. I'm going to try not to get too specific over here. And it's in these dahlias, magnificent peonies. So we had our first peony this morning and our first poppy. Both today. Yeah, so cause for celebration. Now I have to say, this is an aside, but this is the way I talk, as you know. I am in a bit of an altered state right now. I feel like I should disclose that because I'm about 3/4 of the way through writing a new book. And when I'm writing a book, I go somewhere else. So I'm talking about being here now, but I'm really full of shit because I'm kind of gone. And I was noticing that this morning, how everything feels kind of otherworldly. And I was like, oh yeah, this is familiar. Every single book takes me to this place. The first time I ever felt it was when I translated Dark Night of the Soul in 2000 by Jonathan Cross, the 16th century mystic. And it's a heavy text. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's intense, that teaching about being complete, talk about being dismantled and stripped. That's what that text is about. And it's beautiful. And I remember thinking, if I die after I finish translating this, that'll be okay. Like this is taking everything, I'm giving everything, and I'm empty, I'm done. I feel like I was done. And that I feel that way again. So I felt that way for all of them. So there's something that is required, and any of you who are artists, because I am an artist, just with words. I'm not just telling people stuff. I'm mining the beauty of language, I hope, to be able to offer it. And those of you who are artists know that feeling of being used, right? Songwriting, singing. It's worth it, but I just was, there's another aside 3B or whatever. I am listening to an audiobook. Don't you love audiobooks? God, if you haven't gotten into them yet, they're just magic, especially when read by the author. So it's V's new book, V, formerly known as Eve Ensler, and it's called Reckoning. And the whole introduction is about writing, but I feel like it could apply to any of the arts where you're really harvesting spirit in your work. I highly recommend it. Okay, what was she going to say here? Let's see. Oh, let's talk about what we mean by holy ground. That's a good idea. So if I'm not that interested in religion, what am I interested in? And what draws you to a place like the Community of Love versus the Baptist Church? Nothing wrong with the Baptist Church, but there's a difference. There's a reason you're sitting here and not there, perhaps. And it has something to do with direct experience. So to be on a mystical path, and the book I'm writing, by the way, is called Ordinary Mysticism. And to be on a mystical path is to be on a path that values direct connection with the mystery, with the sacred, with beauty, with wonder. That's what it means to be a mystic. That's why you qualify, each of you, and I'm getting there myself. We qualify as mystics if we are hungry for direct experience, if we're thirsty for wonder, if we're willing to enter the heart of the fire, because that's where the true thing lives and is beckoning us. So direct experience of the sacred can take the form of a hymn in church. I'm not saying it can't, although religiosity is sometimes an impediment to direct spiritual experience. Not by definition, but it can be. It's got a lot of hooks in it. But direct experience is of that which our souls most deeply long for. You can call it God, you don't have to. It has something to do with love. Actually, it has everything to do with love. So over the years of translating the mystics and speaking about the teachings of the mystics across the spiritual traditions, I have tried to convey them in such a way that opens hearts, that doesn't necessarily require beliefs. But then so I began by doing that in such a way that people would recognize the presence of the sacred in all the world's spiritual traditions. God of Love, my book, God of Love, was my first attempt to do that. Then this deconstruction impulse that my parents embedded in me began to go after the patriarchy. Because that's where I felt dominant culture, some people call it. It's less divisive a term, dominant culture than patriarchy, but let's just call a spade a spade. The dudes who wrote the sacred texts of the world's religions for themselves, I mean, there's some beautiful stuff there, but it also is irrelevant to a large swath of the human family who do not identify as male, and for whom many of the teachings and values of the world's religious traditions are worse than irrelevant. They're harmful. Among those harmful messages are perfection and purification. This notion that there is some ultimate state, you could call it salvation, redemption in the Judeo-Christian, well, Christian language, Jews don't really talk so much about that. You could call it enlightenment or awakening in the non-Western spiritual traditions. It means it's in all of them. I'm not just picking on the Judeo-Christian Islamic structures. It's also in Hinduism, Buddhism, all of them. It's in the indigenous traditions. I mean, in the indigenous traditions, there at least, thank you, goddess, is the presence of Mother Earth as being primary. But culturally, there's still, the men have the power. So I went after the patriarchy a little bit in Wild Mercy, and now I feel like I'm going after religion itself in this new book, Ordinary Mysticism. And it's scary. I need you. Do you have my back? Okay, thank you. Because who knows? Actually, I'm really not worried about what happened. I mean, what can they do? But it's like the layers are being peeled away. It's exciting. It's exciting to dismantle some of these ways of seeing and being that value that which has caused harm not only to individuals, not only to populations, to branches of the human family, such as women, gay people, trans people, Black people, and people of color everywhere, people who are otherly disabled. But so we're not only dismantling these messages that harm ourselves, that harm these populations of our beloveds, but also the earth itself. The harm being perpetrated on our mother, the earth, is directly proportionate to the degree to which people in power have clung to their power and continue to perpetuate structures of harm and refuse to take accountability. So this new way is inviting everybody to take accountability, not by virtue of an urge for perfection, but through vulnerability, through dismantling these false notions that there's some state to attain that is perfect, that is spiritual, that is holy, that is worthy, but rather to humble ourselves, to strip ourselves, to connect with each other, to stand in our glory unapologetically at the same time that we make ourselves available for the, as V calls it, reckoning that is upon us. Technology has a bad rap, as does business, as does politics. In this new book, I'm realizing that I've got to lift up these arenas of the human enterprise that have done harm, yes, but that can be a place for transformation, for conveying this beauty and wonder, this truth of interconnection. I recently interviewed someone for the book, a woman named Danielle Creddick, and she started something called the Google Empathy Lab. And the Google Empathy Lab is it's been 8 years, people have been working on this around the clock, is a place where our finest minds are hard at work to infuse artificial intelligence with the values of kindness, of compassion, of relationality, and looking to the indigenous wisdom traditions for guidance about how to do that, how to center earth-based relational kind, vulnerable, not just values, but realities. So that just filled my heart that that's happening, that this is in fact what's going on behind the scenes. So we're hearing all this stuff about AI. We think of robots programming themselves and taking over the world, and autonomous soldier robots that are going to just make war. That's what they're programmed to do. I mean, maybe that is a danger, but there's also this other stuff going on, and to believe that we're not alone as we sit here wanting a world that is rooted in peace and nonviolence, in love and an ethic of care. It's happening. It's happening in business. It's happening in politics. I have a friend who's running for state senate in Montana, a very traditional kind of cowboy culture. And she's finding it everywhere there. People want love. They want to give love. They want to receive love. They want to live from a place of love. So I'm believing that is true. And in many ways, this allergy I'm developing to religion feels like a symptom of a bigger love that's rising. What do you think? It's possible. It's possible. Oh gosh. I guess when I talk about finding the sacred in the center of our lives, our ordinary lives as holy ground, I'm thinking about all the things you're probably thinking about. Love, sex, nature, death, food. But I'd love to just take a moment and hear some of the places in regular life where you find the presence of the sacred. You could just call it out.
Garden.
Garden.
Horses.
Ceremony.
Helping people.
Bird song.
Soil.
Mountains.
Mountains. Water.
Trees.
Mystic teachings.
Mystic teaching. Okay.
They're there too. Presents.
Cat
turds.
Cat turds?
Furs.
Cat turds and furs. And what was
think about that.
I'm willing. Oh, thank you, Jenny, for the sound effects. What was it I missed over?
Human.
Each other.
Music.
I was waiting for that one. Okay, good one. Thank you. And yes, to your point, Joseph, in the mystical teachings, in books, in texts, sacred texts, but in contemporary literary novels, in all of the arts. This is where I'm finding it most, in the arts. And not most, but especially alive for me right now. Because the beauty of language, by the way, I cannot bear preachy spiritual texts or self-help books. People send them to me all the time and they want me to blurb them. And it's like, oh, I just can't, unless it's beautiful, I can't do it. That's like my main criterion. Language for me needs to point beyond itself. It's why poetry is so powerful, or can be. Good poetry. Bad poetry sucks, but good poetry points to that which it's attempting to describe. That's why the mystics speak to us, because they often speak in the language of poetry, evocative rather than descriptive. Because that true beauty that our souls and our bodies are longing for, it can only be expressed through metaphor. But thank God for metaphor. The metaphors are so juicy and delicious, and it's what keeps us here. One of the things. So, bless you. perfection and purification, these ideas of some kind of endpoint, can be impediments to reclaiming that very sacred thing that we think they're talking about, but aren't. And I think that those ideals have had usefulness over time. I just think everything's changing now, and they no longer do. And so what do we have instead? If our ideas of the great awakened master are no longer relevant, where do we find what we were wanting when we projected that on these other people, everyone from Jesus to Gandhi? Where do we find it now? We find it in our mistakes. We find it in our relationships. We find it in the boundaries we put up when we say, no, I'm not going to actually have that relationship in my life anymore because it's taking my life force. The mystics that I love actually were all rebels. They were all troublemakers. Teresa of Avila created a whole reform movement in the Catholic Church that was based on returning to values of silence and simplicity, of solitude, and also of joy and celebration. I mean, Teresa and her nuns lived in cloistered convents, but they were dancing, they were cooking, they were laughing, they were making fun of the serious white dudes who were telling them what to do. Hildegard of Bingen, too, the medieval Rhineland visionary, Julian of Norwich, who turned inward rather than continuing to participate in a world that did not reflect what she knew to be true, which is that God is love and all will be well, and all will be well, and every kind of thing shall be well. Francis and Clare of Assisi both rebelled against the social norms and a society of overconsumption, and returned and lifted up values of simplicity. Mirabai, my namesake, also 16th century, like John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila, who I've translated. Mirabai was one that was born into wealth and privilege, although women rarely had any actual privilege, but into a social stratum that insisted that she marry a prince. But she was married to Lord Krishna, the god of love, and had a complete devotion to Krishna that required her to stand up against the entire social system that she was born into and married into. She left it all behind and became a barefoot beggar, singing and dancing for God for most of her life. Laleshwari from Kashmir, the Kashmiri poet, 14th century, also left it all behind, was in a position of privilege and power in the culture, left. She not only took off her shoes like Mirabai, she took off all her clothes. She was sky-clad, one of the sky-clad mystics who went about naked with only her hair to cover her. These were Muhammad. The Prophet Muhammad dared to say, God is speaking through me and insisting that true reality is love. That's all there is. I know that's not probably what they taught you on Fox News. You probably have never watched Fox News since you're sitting in this room. But anyway, that is the essence of Islam. God is love and nothing exists except love. His wife, Khadija, who was 15 years older than he was, who asked him to marry her because she was the one with the wealth and power. He was just an illiterate camel driver. She's the first one to recognize his message of unity. She was a rebel. Jesus, Mary Magdalene, all my favorite holy ones were rebels. So I'm not rejecting them all. I'm just looking to what they're saying underneath the way that we lift them up as some kind of ideals that we can never hope to approach. What we can do instead is look to them as exemplars, as luminaries, to light our own path, of embracing our lives as holy ground. I'm going to end with Ish. Am I right? Is it time to wind down? Whatever you want, hon. Actually, one more thing and then I'll end. And that is, use your holy imagination. When I speak about these wisdom keepers like Teresa of Avila and Lala Rabia, the 9th century Arabian mystic who was a slave and was liberated and chose to live in the desert as an ascetic because the only thing that mattered to her was loving God for God alone, as she said. When I speak about these beings, I'm speaking about them actually as living allies, that they are accessible to us when we are trying to find our way, when we're trying to live lightly on this earth, when we're trying to choose being kind over being right, when we're attempting to find a modicum of equanimity in the midst of a world that is calling on us to constantly distract ourselves and stay in a high state of agitation. Every morning when I sit on that fucking cushion, sorry, Mike, I just remembered this is gonna be on the radio. I breathe my way through begging for some moment of lining myself up with that which is greater than all of my thoughts on the matter. I regulate my nervous system through breath. I do it every day. I do it in the middle of the night, as you taught me, Jenny, when I wake up afraid for the world, for my children, for my grandchildren. And so there are ways that we can find to pause and recalibrate. And we must, this is what I'm trying to say, those are revolutionary acts. I call on my ancestors in the form of my grandmothers, yes, my Jewish grandmothers, but also on all sides, but also my teachers and the ones, these ancestors that I've had the great privilege of translating and writing about. They are my living allies, and they are yours too, whoever yours may be. And all we have to do is use our holy imagination. It's another one of those sacred well springs, the imagination. Ramdas taught me this, my lifelong friend and teacher Ramdas, that all you have to do is imagine that you're having a conversation, in his case with his guru. In his mind, someone said to him, aren't you just making that up? And he said, sure. Isn't that great that I can do that? So do that. Use your holy imagination. Cultivate these relationships with the unseen beings, and they will do through you what you can't do for yourself. Connect with each other. Connect with our mother, the earth. This is truly holy ground. And I'm going to end with a quote by my friend and someone it's hard not to elevate, Annie Lamott. Help is a prayer that is always answered. It doesn't matter how you pray, with your head bowed in silence, or crying out in grief, or dancing. Churches are good for prayer, but so are garages, and cars, and mountains, and showers, and dance floors. Years ago, I wrote an essay that began, "Some people think that God is in the details, but I have come to believe that God is in the bathroom." Prayer usually means praise or surrender, acknowledging that you have run out of bullets, but there are no firm rules. Annie Lamott from Plan B, I think. Yes. Thank you for your loving attention.
Stay there if you want. I'm going to sing a song that some of you know. If you don't know it, you can learn it. It's in Hebrew. It's Hineni, here I am. Here we are. We're all right here. Here we are. Hineni.
Osa etatsmi translates, according to Mirabai, transforming myself. Here I am right now, transforming myself. Merkavala Shahina, as a vessel, a chariot is the literal translation of chariot, or a vehicle of the Shahina, of the Holy Feminine. So even for you dudes, you got the Holy Feminine in there. She's hanging out. So here I am, transforming myself as a vessel for the Holy. Hineni osa etatsmi Merkava Shahina Hineni
osa etatsmi
Merkava Shahina
Merkava Shahina
Hineni osa etatsmi Merkava Shahina Merkava Shahina Hineni osa etatsmi Merkava Shahina
Merkava Shahina
Hineni osa etatsmi Merkava Shahina Merkava Shahina Hineni osa etatsmi Merkava Shahina
Merkava Shahina
Hineni osa etatsmi Merkava Shahina Merkava Shahina Hineni osa etatsmi Merkava Shahina
Merkava Shahina
Hineni osa etatsmi Merkava Shahina Merkava Shahina. You are, there you are, a vessel divine. You are it. You're it. Now we're going to sing our love song. It's over there. Now there is love on earth and it has begun with me. Now there is love on earth, the love that was meant to be. With all our relations, loved ones all are we. Now I walk with my family in perfect harmony. Love has begun with me, and this is the moment now. With every breath I take, let this be my joyous vow. To take each moment and live each moment in love eternally. Now there is love on earth, and it has begun with me. We are the light, the love, and the presence. Wherever we are, love is, and all is well. It is, really is. They're smooth too. Recommend really good. Thanks for coming. Come back tonight at 7 for Tina and her pony. She'll be enjoying us event.
Great, Mirabai.
Yay. Mike has to edit.
Yes, sorry about that. Can you just bleep it? I do have a potty mouth, but sometimes there's no other way to express what I'm trying to say.